This is Jody Sidlauskas, the RIT Associate Archivist, and it is October 18th, 2014. Today we are interviewing alumni from RIT's class of 1964. It's Brick City Weekend, and the 50th reunion of this class is here and has agreed to give us their interpretations of their time at RIT. And at this time, I have with me Kevin Gilson, and we're going to start, Kevin, just by saying, what years did you attend RIT?
Okay, well, I transferred into RIT.
Okay.
I had gone to Auburn Community College, where I got a 2-year degree in engineering. So in 1961, I transferred into the photo program here at RIT because I realized I wasn't going to be an engineer. That was not going to work. And I had been in photography since the age of 9. So this was a natural gravitation. And it was at the 1964, it was either come here or go to Switzerland. Those were the choices if you're going to go into photo science. If you wanted to go in illustration, you could go to a number of different places. You got California, you go, a number of places, but not for photo science. So not wishing to go to Switzerland, I came here. I was living in Marcellus, New York with my parents, so I'm raised in this end of the state.
And so RIT had a good reputation.
Yeah, it did. It didn't. I didn't know all that much about it at the time, but I knew that they had the program that would do my segue from engineering into into the sciences. I could get a degree in sciences. So I spent 3 years at the downtown campus.
Okay.
To get my degree finished. So it was all the sequences of courses that got in the way.
Yes, to get there.
Right.
So you were in the photo science program.
Right.
And what buildings were most of your classes held in?
Almost all of my classes were in the Clark building.
Okay.
So I didn't really, even though we only had a few buildings.
Right.
I can think of only maybe one other building that I might have had a class in, but everything was pretty much, when I transferred in, I had all my math out of the way. I mean, I had up to differential equations at Auburn Community College, so I didn't have to take any math here. I had all my basic chemistry out of the way there. I just had to take photochemistry courses. And I had my physics courses out of the way, so I just had to take Todd's physics course and photophysics course. And then, so I kind of had one foot in the class of 65 and one foot in the class of 64. I graduated with the class of 64, although I could have graduated with the class of 65. That I had, as the sequences fell in place, I was ready to take what I thought was my last year, and they said, well, part of that is your senior research. And in order to take senior research, a prerequisite is statistics, and you haven't had the Rickmer statistics course yet. So I did a little negotiation with C.B. Niblett, and they said, if I take a statistics course at Syracuse University during the summer, will you let me take my senior research concurrent with the statistics course that Rickmus is going to teach? And they said yes. So I was able to not have to come back for one course.
Nice.
That was really nice. Because at that point, that was my 6th year in college, and I was ready to get out of here. Yeah. So
time to move on.
Time to move on. Yeah. So that all worked out, and as it turned out, I didn't use statistics at all in my senior research. But there we are.
Had to take it. So where did you live?
When I came to school here, I lived in the dorm, the Nathaniel Rochester Hall, for the first 2 years I was here. And then in the 3rd year, I was kind of tired of the dorm. I was older than most of the other students at that point. And so I talked with the housing folks, and they said, oh, we have a couple of one-bedroom, or actually studio apartments at Bacchus Street in the married students' housing. You can rent one of those. I said, that's fine with me. That works. And it worked nicely because right down the hall was my first year roommate, David Smith, who was a photographer. He was an illustration major, but he had gotten married in the summer between my last 2 years. David was in the class of 65. He married Ginger, and I can't remember Ginger's last name, but her father was one of the architects on the new campus here.
Oh.
And so I went to their wedding in Concord, New Hampshire, as the best man for David.
Oh.
And so they lived just 2 doors down the hall from me at Backer Street. It was all very nice, you know,
Yes.
very, very convenient.
Sounds nice.
And there's a couple of other my classmates lived there as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it
Okay.
was a nice place to be out there.
Mm-hmm.
A little remote from the campus.
Yeah, we haven't heard much about that street before this.
Yeah, it was an interesting building because my remembrance of it was maybe a turn of the century, you know, either late 1800s, early 1900s factory, and the floors in it had to be, I don't know, 12 feet of concrete or something between the floors. The ceilings were 20 feet high. My room was almost a perfect cube.
Oh.
20 by 20 by 20 straight up. and it actually was so tall that some of the married students in their apartments would build a loft and have plenty of room above the top of the loft to walk around up there and all. It was quite a remarkable building. I kept my bicycle in the basement, and the basement was a stone basement. The city ran a library in one corner of the building.
Oh, yeah, that was mentioned.
Mm-hmm. And so it had the old cast iron stairs that went up to the front door, the big double front doors, big wooden front doors. So it was an interesting building to be in. We had one phone in the hall, kind of a communal payphone in the hall. It was an interesting place to be. You know, I kind of hung my wash out to dry on a clothesline that I stretched across my apartment. We had washing machines around the corner from where I was, but dried all my shit. And actually, when it was kind of nice because I could drape the sheets and give myself a 2-room apartment for a short while. You know, between the big part of the apartment and then where the kitchenette was, part of it. You know, it was.
Did you belong to a fraternity?
I did. I'm a charter brother of Alpha Phi Omega, the Xi Zeta chapter.
Okay.
I was secretary of the chapter.
So were you involved with the bringing the tiger here?
I personally was not.
Okay.
Dave Page was,
Yes.
but that was not something that I was involved
You
with.
got involved in.
Yeah.
Okay. Those hijinks. Do you remember the tiger?
I do remember the tiger. Yes, I remember Dave Page handling the tiger and all. Yeah, it was a cute little tiger.
Mm-hmm.
Till it got kind of bigger, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then from what we understand, because it got bigger and a little stronger.
Oh, very much so. Yes, he was no longer the cute little one that's in that picture of the girl at the library.
Yes.
Reading the boy. Yeah, it was
Yes.
no longer cute like that.
So they had
Yeah.
to leave him at the zoo then.
Yeah.
After that first few months, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it lasted very long.
It wasn't terribly long. I don't remember how long it was now. I stop and think about that. Yeah.
So I think you've mentioned some of your professors. Did you have a favorite?
I have a favorite. I guess Hollis Todd was. Bill Shoemaker. Bill Shoemaker and Hollis Todd were my favorite. Because Bill Shoemaker especially, because he was ex-Navy. He was a lot more laid back than some of the other professors. But it was excellent as a teacher. But having his Navy experience, he kind of took some of the hijinks in stride. And I can remember one day in class, somebody in the back row had fallen asleep, and he's staying up in the room. The teaching platform was actually a platform raised, 18 inches or something off the floor.
Yeah.
And so he's standing up, and Bill Shoemaker was a big man. And so he looked, he spotted the student asleep back there, and he motioned the rest of us to not say anything. He turned around, picked up a piece of chalk from the chalkboard, aimed, and threw it at the student and beamed him to wake him up.
He hit him out there.
He hit him,
Good
yeah. Yeah.
Funny.
It is funny, some of the things that took place there. Yes.
And what class would you have had him for?
Oh, golly. What was it that he taught? I remember him, but I'm not sure I remember what the class was. Todd taught physics, and Rickmers taught statistics, and we had, and in those days, no matter whether you were in science or you were in illustration or in commercial, we all started off the first 2 semesters here with the same course. So we had the studio courses. We learned to use the view cameras. We learned to use to light subjects and all of that stuff. So it was kind of fuzzy who taught what.
Okay.
He was more on the technical photography side, and so I don't remember what exactly he taught. To be honest about it.
That's okay.
Yeah, no.
There was a lot of strong teachers in that program.
There were, and because
Very
I
talented.
because I transferred in, I actually had some spaces in my program at times, and one quarter, I took a course from Charlie Arnold from Minor White, and a course over in the art school, and thinking that let me investigate this illustration side a little bit more, because I had been the school photographer at Auburn Community College.
Oh.
So I took yearbook pictures, I took sports pictures, I took candid shots of students around the campus that was used in the newspaper and the yearbook, and all. So you know that I had a picture taking background as well as a scientific background, and so I tried those out a little bit and got a flavor of Minor. We've been talking about Minor White and all, and actually one of the photographs, I submitted 2 photographs for the display, and I refer to my second photograph, which was taken just this year, as my digital photographic submission to the display, and I called it my Minor White remembrance, because it's a picture of the house that an 1826 house that I'm a docent in Ann Arbor, but it's a picture of the dormer with peeling paint and this rusty bell up there, and it's the kind of thing that would have attracted Minor White to make a photograph out of, especially abstracts. He loved abstracts of peeling. He and Edward Weston liked peeling paint, what we used to call the peeling paint photographs, you know. Yeah, so that's kind of my homage to my having taken the course from him.
Right. Very nice. Yeah. You had some good teachers there.
Oh, I had some excellent teachers, and I valued them more once I got out and working than I did when I was there. But
Sure.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
How about Dr. Ellingson? Do you have any
We
association with him?
Well, I didn't really have a lot of association with him, but we saw him around the campus the campus wasn't that big.
Right.
We saw him all the time around the campus, so we knew who he was. We recognized him on sight, and he always said hello. He's a very friendly man. It was a very intimate place to be, and I'd come from a small town. Marcellus, New York is 1,200 people. My high school graduating class was 62. So
That's a good fit.
it was a good fit. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
So it was nice.
How about Stephen Walls?
Oh yeah, Steve was a great friend. He was of course our advisor for AFIO, and I was over there all the time in the student activities to pick up tickets to the symphony orchestra, because we were at the other end of Main Street from the Eastman Theater. So I just had to walk down the other end of the shopping district and go to a concert. In fact, I used to walk down there a lot and go to the student performances down there, because I'm a musician now, and I was in music then as well. So, in fact, I sang in an octet as part of at RIT.
Oh, you did?
We had an octet, and for a year it was together, and we didn't do a cappella like the guys do here, but we had piano accompaniment for it. Yeah, it's close harmony.
Nice. I wonder if that's in the yearbook, is it?
I don't know if that made the yearbook or not. It would have been if it made the yearbook, it would have been the 63 yearbook, not the 64 yearbook.
Okay.
Yeah.
Check.
Yeah.
So you had free concerts to go to at the Eastman Theater?
Yeah, I got tickets to they had tickets for all the concerts, so I just had to go there and say I'm going to go to the concert Thursday night, and they'd give me a ticket, and I'd head down there and get a free concert.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder how many students took advantage of that.
Quite a few did, actually. Yeah, quite a few. And then, of course, the students down there put on a lot of. They had a whole week of American music at that point in time, and you could go down there and hear all of these. The first one of the early performances of the opera Crucible was done by the students at the Eastman School, and I got to see that.
My
And
goodness.
it was really wonderful. It was very different, something very different and very unusual for me to see that. And things like that, we got an opportunity. And I used to go down there sometimes for the student recitals. I got to, at the time, Howard Hansen was the dean of the school there, and his son was going there, and I got to hear his son playing his recital on euphonium, of all things. It's concert tuba.
Oh.
And I had never heard a solo concert tuba anything before. I knew what it was because we had the big sousaphones in our high school band, but it was a concert tuba, and
Wow.
it was really unusual. Yeah.
That was a big plus. I mean, as far as
Yeah.
culture goes,
Yeah, it was.
to be so close to the Eastman
Yeah.
School.
And we didn't, and at that point in time, RIT did not have a lot of these groups they have now. We didn't have a band, we didn't have an orchestra, we didn't have, I've heard walking around today, the students playing the drum line out there, the drum
Oh, are
corps
they?
thing. Yeah, we're out there. We didn't have any of that. We didn't have any of that stuff. It was nothing at all. So it was nice to have that nearby, especially for those of us who were very love music and were very much a part of that. In fact, I think one of the things that I seem to remember is that Hollis Todd, Dr. was a violinist. And my understanding is that he had an opportunity either to teach violin at the Eastman School or teach physics at RIT.
Really?
That was my remembrance of Hollis Todd. Yeah. We had some very very interesting faculty. Yeah.
Did you go on to graduate school?
I did go on to graduate school kind of in pieces. I never did get a graduate degree, but I did take some graduate school work at the University of Dayton when I worked in Dayton, Ohio, in engineering management. So I did some, and then I did a few graduate studies just to realize I wasn't going to go on in statistics, but at George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and I forget the name of whichever one it was on Long Island. Took a course there in linear algebra. But yeah, well, it kind of fit in with my photographic science study, some of what I was doing. Yeah, and then in Dayton, Ohio, they had non-credit courses that were taught, not through the university, but through an engineering and science institute, they called it, and they'd have people come in. You could take for very little money, but no credit, courses in operations research, I took Fourier analysis, operations research, and some courses like that were non-credit. So I've done some postgraduate work, I guess we'll say, but not. Okay. I never accumulated enough credits in all the courses that I took to actually add up to a degree.
Yeah. Changing subjects here. Were you involved with the highball operation?
I was and I wasn't. Now, part of it was since I had a foot in both classes.
Yeah.
I actually had more classes with the class of 65 than with the class of 64 at times. And when Operation Highball was going on, that was the situation. But AFIO provided some of the support for that.
Okay.
So you'll see some people in the pictures with sailor cats on. Those were us. But at the time, I also worked in the cafeteria, clearing tables and dirty dishes and that kind of thing. And so just as the balloon went up, just as it got caught in the church, I got to see all of that, and then I had to go to work. I had to be over there ready for dinner, ready to serve dinner. So, so I couldn't watch the aftermath of it all, but I certainly read about it in the papers the next day. How we had completely screwed up traffic on Plymouth on the inner loop.
Right.
That was yeah.
Right.
But I don't think everybody wanted that kind of publicity.
Wasn't what was intended, was
No.
it?
Mm-mm. And even coming here, talking with my colleagues, I got to learn more about some of the pieces that I didn't know about.
Yeah.
But I knew all the guys who were working on that.
Yes.
Yeah. They were all crazy. I mean, if you talk with Jim Langone, and yeah, you know what I mean.
I think Becky got there in a few
Yeah.
Do you remember any kind of events or things you did as the Alpha Phi Omega group as a group? Did you have any certain events that you sponsored or?
We helped out in a number of events on campus. Highball was one of them. In the fall of 1963, this campus had been announced in '62 that they had bought this property out here.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the South Henry Institute of Technology T-shirts came from. And so in the fall of '63, the college decided to hold the freshman picnic orientation down here at the new campus.
Mm-hmm.
So they cut the grass on an area, and my remembrance is that the picture you have up in the archives is a little wooden bridge over the stream.
Mm-hmm.
Was built by my fellow brothers. I was not one of them, but they came out and they built that, and then we all came out and essentially staffed the picnic.
Oh.
So we were out here with the freshmen, helping them, get around and
Yeah.
understand where the food was and
Yeah.
and all of that. Yeah. So that was probably one of the biggest things that we did. So the individual brothers were involved in some other things,
Mm-hmm.
but that was one that sticks in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it seems like that was kind of a exciting time for the Institute there because they had purchased the property and made that decision finally of what they were going to do.
Right.
Did you have a sense of generally how students felt about it?
We liked the downtown campus.
Really?
We really did, because everything was so contained, so close. We got to see each other. We didn't get to know the commuting students very well. Mm-hmm. That was kind of a shame. Mm-hmm. And when we got when we started holding classes in the 50 Main Street West building, that kind of dispersed things a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I was talking with one of the printing students today who was here. We went on this little tour, this little junket this afternoon, and I said to him, and he remember we flooded you out one year, and he said, I remembered that. We made our own we had to learn how to make emulsions, a photographic emulsion, and code it on a piece of film and then make pictures with it. We actually did that, but the emulsion had to be made in the total dark. Mm-hmm. So we're in a chemistry laboratory with the water running and all of that stuff, making these emulsions, right? Mm-hmm. And suddenly we hear this pound, 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 pound on the door. I go, what the heck is that? They said, turn off the water. I said, what's going on? We had no idea. So we quickly put all the emulsions in light-tight containers, and we turned the lights on, and then we realized some pieces of emulsion had washed down the table into the sink at the end of the chemistry table and plugged the sink. And the sink was overflowing onto the floor, right straight into the printing department downstairs. Oops is right. And we hadn't a clue because everything was in the dark. None of us had walked around there going splash, splash, splash on the floor yet. But of course, in the Clark building, all the walls were metal, so the doors were metal. So he's pounding on this metal door, and saying, it really made a sound. Mm-hmm. It was something else.
Oh.
Uh, and then, of course, we had the cage there. Vance, I don't know what Vance's last name was. Vance was the keeper of the equipment in the cage, and he would let it. We have to sign our life away for anything we took out of there, to use lenses or whatever it was, you know.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. The photo students have a cage today, and all kinds of photographic equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
they're actually taking out these cameras and using film still.
Right. Yeah.
Not that they have to, but I think in some of their classes they're still.
I'm told they still do a little
Yeah.
photo processing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Yeah, they at least to get their fingers wet and realize why they don't want to get their fingers wet anymore. Yeah.
So where did your career go after you left RIT?
Well, it took some interesting turns. John Polger and I, graduating together, both took jobs with the U.S. Navy down in Washington, D.C. We both worked for the same little bitty research and development department that existed in the top corner of the building of the Naval Photographic Center in Anacostia, and we lived together down there. And actually, his brother lived with us too for a while. He was an intern at Capitol Hill that summer, so in summer of '64. So he lived with. So the three of us were living down there, and then his brother went back to school. And so John and I moved to Washington. We worked for the U.S. Naval Photo Center. I did testing and evaluation of photographic chemicals and materials, and he worked on the equipment side of it, looking at the equipment. And then I got into testing lenses, because they asked me to start looking at some of the lenses that they were starting to commission people to do, particularly for underwater photography. So they had a test rig built, and I got to test the lenses in it. And that's when I said to them, well, why don't you send me to the University of Rochester's summer optics course so I can learn a little bit more about it. So I came up here and spent 2 weeks here. And of course there was an inferior motive on my part, because at the time, as I left Rochester, I was dating a young lady here who was a nursing student down in a hospital in Elmira, but her family lived here, and I met her on a blind date here. And so we were trying to do this long distance romance thing. And so I took advantage of that to come up here for 2 weeks and see her as well as take the courses. And she came to some of the events with me too. That was very nice. But we enjoyed that. Yeah. So I studied a little bit of optics here, and then about 3 years or so. Actually, John Polger and I both, in talking about it, think that of our graduating class, the only people who got paid less for going out of RIT for that year were the people who enlisted in the military. We had to be the bottom. We had $5,000 a year was what we got paid when we first entered government service. Oh, you live in Washington, D.C.
I heard someone else say today they made $5,000.
Yeah. Oh, it was brutal in Washington, D.C. trying to live that way.
Yeah.
And so so I got a job. I was approached through my connections and support for the Society of Photographic Scientists and Engineers for some programs that were run in the Washington area. I got approached by the SPSE folks to become managing editor of the Abstracts of Photographic Science and Engineering Literature in New York. So for a period of, I think it was probably 3 years, I don't really remember the date. I had to go back and look at my resume to figure the dates out. I was managing editor of the Abstracts document, which eventually, by the way, came here to RIT. And existed here for a short while before I think they realized how difficult it was to put that publication out. But I worked for Engineering Index in New York, right across the street from the United Nations.
Wow.
Yeah, and lived in New York City, and then finally moved out to Long Island because I couldn't stay in the city anymore. I'm not a big city person. Well, I was born in New York, and my relatives lived in New York. I was raised in Buffalo and Syracuse area, and so. So then I went to the Abstracts, APS as we called it, And then from when I got tired of New York City after a few years, I put out some feelers and got a job in Dayton, Ohio, with a company then called Data Corporation. There were a number of RIT grads there when I got there. Russ Zimmerman, who graduated in '65, I believe. Gaylord Helgeson, David Kelch, Bob Studley. We were all RIT grads. And we all worked together out there. I did a lot of testing of materials for the U.S. Air Force, and got to use some of that optics stuff that I'd got here at U of R to set up to create a calibration laboratory for calibrating standard light sources for sensitometers, to do standard exposures on testing exposures on film. So I got to set that up and do that, and then the recession of 1972-73 caught up with the funding from the federal government, and with a 1-year-old daughter and wife in Dayton, Ohio, I got laid off. Well, my wife she was from New York. She wanted to come back. She didn't like Dayton, Ohio, as it turned out. But and so I put out some feelers again and got two job interviews, and both of them were quality engineering jobs, based in photography. One of them was with General Analytic and Film in Binghamton. They were producing ANSCO film at the time, ANSCO cameras, and all that, and aerial photographic materials. And the other was at Goddard Space Flight Center on a program called Landsat. Who knew? Landsat, satellite in the sky, taking pictures. Okay, whatever. So, so I called one of my friends at Kodak, and I said, "What would you advise?" And he said, "Take the job in Washington." I said, "Okay." So I thanked him. His fellow's name was Johnny Graham, was a rep for Kodak, and so I thanked him. Took the job in Washington D.C., which my wife was much happier with because her sister was living not far from in Washington D.C. area, and so and then a couple of years later, guess what happened to ANSCO film? Yep. End of ANSCO film. I would have lost my job a couple of years later in all places. Binghamton, New York. What's there to do in Binghamton, New York for a photographic scientist? So, so I went to Goddard Space Flight Center to work on Landsat, and guess who I ran into there? John Bolger, my old roommate. He had gotten there in 1970. I found out I didn't ever figure out what year he'd gotten there, but he told me yesterday he got there in 1971. He was working on the photo lab side, and I was working on the quality department side. So I was working with all of our quality inspectors, and so I got to work with photographic film there because we were transferring all the data from the satellite, digital data from satellite, to film using some digital techniques, using an electron beam recorder, which was we were, I think, the only people in the country doing electron beam recording on film. And so I had to debug that process. I was asked to take a look at that process and find out why the reject rates were so high for the images. And I had to go through and use one of the greatest things that Professor Rickmers did was he introduced me to analysis of variance, which today we kind of call design of experiments in the Six Sigma world. And so he introduced me to that, and I had a little book that he said, "You ought to buy this book." And I had no idea why at the time. So here, years later, I pull out the book, I can construct an experimental design using analysis of variance, and was able to show that we had how we had to change the control limits in the photo lab for the control process to get the process in control for the electron beam recording, which was very different than photon white light recording. So I got to do that, and then from there I got to test and put in production some laser beam recorders for writing on 9.5-inch film satellite data directly with laser beams. That was something state of the art at the time. And then I went on, as film started petering out, I went on to other programs, the heat capacity mapping mission, which was the first attempt to look at the heat budget of the Earth, how much heat was being absorbed, how much heat was being emitted. At the time, we call it global warming today, but it wasn't known under those terms at that time. This was the first experiment in doing that. I got an opportunity to participate in a project to create what you and I today on TV see as the weather moving across the universe there, except we did it Disney fashion. It was from a NOAA satellite, and we had the programmers create an overlay map of the eastern seaboard, which was, there was no east. We only got the eastern half of the country. And so we generated a series of images over different time frames over a period of a day. We printed them out on 9.5-inch film, so we got transparencies. We registered them, pin registered them, and then we put them one at a time under a video camera. And we took a couple of frames of this one, then we put the next one on, a couple of frames of that one, next one, a couple of frames of that one. And so when we played it back, we could see the clouds inching their way, whoomp, 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 whoomp across the. And that was the beginnings of what we see today on my iPhone.
Right.
What I checked this morning to see
can look
how much
at
rain am I going to
anytime.
get into today. That was the beginnings of that back then.
And that was about what years?
Oh, that would have been in the 1980s sometime. I don't remember. I can't
Yeah.
really put dates with it. I really don't know.
Excuse me.
Yeah, so that was in that time period. And then what was it? It was another one that I worked on there that had other ramifications in later in time. I don't remember what it is.
Are you
right
retired now?
now. I'm sort of retired. The interesting thing about winding up in quality management was that the last program I got to work with in the space community was for the Taiwan Space Agency. I was the quality manager on a program we put some ground stations in place for command and the command and control software to command and control their first satellite that went up in 2000. And so in the late 90s, 1994 through 99, I worked on that program and with the Taiwan people. I actually had to go over to Taiwan and teach them total quality management in Taiwan, and work with them to set up discrepancy reporting and when testing of software, and coordinate that between Taiwan and our people in the United States and all of that. But when that was over with, I didn't really have anything else to go on to at Goddard, so I quit. And I took a buyout, actually, what I did at that point in time. Not a retirement buyout, but they were laying people off, and I took one of the riff from them. And then I got offered a job in healthcare. And so I became the quality manager for an HMO for the military, the TRICARE program in Baltimore. And I spent 5 years as quality manager there, working on quality programs and quality issues in healthcare. And
That's a switch.
it is a switch, and people ask me how I did that. And actually, one of my classmates said, "How did you do that?" I said, "Well, when you work in quality, it's really very easy. It's really about the customer. It's really about the quality of the product. It's really about the process you use to do it, and all." So in 2004, the fall of 2004, they lost their contract. They did a stupid bid. They lost their contract. And so I just looked at my health and what was going on at that point in time, and I said, well, I got a year and a half to Medicare. We're going to stop now. Called a friend of mine up and said, I'm a free agent. He had his own consulting firm in quality. And I said, you need some help? He said, yeah. So I spent until I moved out to Michigan in 2012, I did consulting through his firm. He talked me into becoming an ISO 9000 auditor. So I still now today, I was just down in Missouri last week auditing a machine shop of all things. I do little companies, small companies. So a machine shop down auditing their quality program down there. And in the end of August, I was in Baltimore auditing another machine shop there in Baltimore. So yeah, so
you can still work if you want.
I can still work if I want. What I did when I moved to Ann Arbor was that I used that background in quality management, and I did a lot of strategic planning with some people with our American Society for Quality section in Baltimore for 20 years. When I got out to Ann Arbor, I looked around and found some nonprofits that needed some ideas about how to do strategic planning, how to set stuff, but they couldn't afford to pay anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so I offered my services, and as a result, I'm on the board of 2 organizations out there now. But I'm helping, I'm still working to help them with strategic planning, budgeting, stuff like that goes along with delivering quality services to people.
Right.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So oftentimes I try to pretend I'm retired, but these people keep me awfully busy. And one of the groups was a cobblestone farm home. It's in Ann Arbor, 1844 home, built by a guy from Rochester, New York, not Rochester, not Rochester, Michigan. Yeah, if you go to Michigan not this past summer before this past summer, Ann and I went up to one of her relatives' summer homes up the north part of what we call the Lower Peninsula. You know, this hand business. You know, it was up here. You know, we can start pointing to things in our hands. They've got me doing it now. And so on our way up, we're passing Ithaca, Michigan, passing Onondaga, Michigan. I had been over to Genesee County, Michigan. Her relatives live in Rochester Hills, Michigan, just north of Rochester, Michigan. I'm thinking to myself, what state am I in?
Yeah.
Where am I? You know, this is really bizarre.
Could be New York.
Yeah. So I mean, just over the border from where I live in Ann Arbor is Pittsfield Township.
Pittsfield.
All those people came out here from New York State and set up their homes in Ann Arbor in the 1820s and 1830s, and brought the names with them.
Recycled names.
They did. Mm-hmm. Every one of them wanted to be reminded of where they came from, I guess. So all the names are out there, you know, and it's really bizarre at times driving around Michigan. Yeah.
Well, Kevin, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to thank you on behalf of the RIT Archives
Okay.
for spending time with us.
Could I touch on a couple? Would you have time for touching on one or two more things?
I'm sorry, sure.
Okay. Well, the one thing I'd like to mention is I don't think people remember that there was an initial non-credit Fortran programming course taught here at RIT, and I think it was that maybe in the spring of 1964. It's when the university got its first computer, which was a business processing computer, which is an IBM 1620, I think it was. And so they said, we're going to teach this Fortran course. It's non-credit. It's going to be held in whatever room it was going to be held in. Bring your lunch. It's a lunchtime course. So we'd all bring our brown bag lunch, and we sat there and learned programming Fortran, not Fortran.
Yeah.
All the other Fortrans that have come since. This was the original Fortran.
Wow.
Yeah.
And a computer. Was that exciting then? I mean,
it was
the thought of computers.
Well, we didn't know quite what to make of it, really. But we wrote programs, and we wrote them out by hand on the coding sheets, and we submitted them into them. They apparently we didn't see the rest of it. They key punched them, fed them into the computer. Yeah. Out came the results. We look at it and say, oh, it didn't work.
Yeah.
What did I do wrong now? And there was no way to debug these things. You know, you just sit there and say, what the heck is wrong with this logic in this? You know. So that was the first computer programming course taught here at RIT.
A lunchtime.
A lunchtime brown bag course, and I think it may have been the spring of 1964. Okay. But if you check and see when the IBM 16, I think it was 1620, was purchased. It was in the base. It was in the ground floor of the 50 Main Street West building. Was where it was located, and that's where the course was taught. Yeah. And then I mentioned the 1963 picnic here on the new campus. We talked about Bacchus Street. And then the other thing was, I understand that all the photos that we submitted that are on display right now up in the whatever building we're in, booth building, are going to be turned into the archive. That's what Mike told me this morning.
Okay.
And if it wasn't, I was going to volunteer something anyway. Of the two things I sent, I told you about the one with the peeling paint. The other one that I submitted is actually a 1962 project that was hung on the walls in the Clark building as one of my student projects.
Oh.
It's a bas relief, and they thought it was so neat over there that what the technique is, if you're not familiar with it, is that you have the negative, you make a positive print from that negative on film, and then you sandwich the two together and you rotate them or move them slightly to create a kind of a shadow kind of image up there. And that was one of our projects. And so being in music as I was at the time, I took my clarinet and a piece of music and I made this artistic photograph and then did that, and I got an A on the project, and I said, oh, this one I got. So I told Mike about it when he wanted the input, and I said, well, I'd like to send that project in as my submission in silver. And so I did, and then what they did here was they copied the back of it, which had the positive print and the negative print and my explanation of what I had done, and they put it next to the picture. Next to, so the 16 by 20 mount board with this picture in it is hanging up there with this back of it on the other piece. So those two pieces go together.
Yeah.
And I have yet one more project that I didn't get an A on. I got a C on this next other one, but I have at home that I could also send in if you want another one that looks like that. But in the Clark building, running the whole length of the hall, there were two kind of little channels, one up and bottom, that you could slip these 16 by 20 boards into.
Okay.
And so our projects when we got finished with the project, we put them all up and they lined the halls, and everybody could look at everybody else's project, which is really neat to see, to do. And so that's one of these such projects. I don't know if anybody else has actually saved. It's kind of accidental that I've saved it, I think, at all. But
yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
You have your college project still.
Yeah.
Those are great.
So Mike Geisinger said, I submitted the one with the greatest breadth, 1962 to 2014 photos, the two extremes.
Well, I have to go take a look at those.
Yeah.
They have them.
There's up in the glass case up there in the gallery up there. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's neat to see other people, and some of them, if you look at some of them, you'll see that they submitted. Well, I submitted a nice color print because I'm a professional photographer. I got to put a nice color print in there, and then I put my digital print here. This is my Kodachrome. This is my digital, and it's difficult to tell the two apart a lot of times. So it's not as mine. You can tell a lot of. You can tell they're different.
Yeah.
You can tell they're very different because the mount board is kind of yellow with age. Stuff like that. It's old.
Yeah.
So it's kind of. I thought it'd be neat to submit that and show the students here. Just this is what we used to. This is how we used to submit our projects here. It was kind of neat to do that. So yeah. I've done some teaching. I used to teach total quality management in high schools in Howard County, Maryland. I spent 15 years teaching kids total quality management.
Oh.
Yeah.
In high school.
In high school, and they get it like that. My adult friends say to me, "Dude, what? The students? What do they know about this stuff?" I said, "They get it, and you don't." That's my entire experience teaching adults, because I used to teach adults in Allied when I worked for Allied Signal. I used to teach them total quality management there as well. So, yeah, I said the kids get it, the adults. Tough time. Yeah.
All right.
So, and the other interesting thing that happened here is for the last 34 years I've been performing music at the Maryland Renaissance Festival, medieval and Renaissance music. John Polger's wife looked at me and she said, "Our son used to do juggling at the Maryland Renaissance Festival."
Oh my gosh.
It's a very small world, isn't it? It gets
Yes.
smaller all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well,
Well,
kinda
thank you. Did we cover everything you wanted
Yeah,
to talk about?
got my list
On
down
your
here.
list?
Yeah, got my list. Yep.
All right, well, thank you, Kevin. I think we said that we're going to have these transcribed,
Mhm.
and we have big plans for them.
Good.
But we are so thankful that you all have given your time today, this weekend, and shared in your experiences. It's just invaluable for us at the Institute.